All right, we are going to get started. So it is everything you want to know about COVID, the COVID vaccine. We're going to talk a little bit about COVID-19 as well. Just make sure that everybody is aware of all the facts. As people may know from this presentation, we updated every Tuesday and Thursday. It has updated information as things evolve. So all of these presentations are taped, and there is the date on them, which is March. Today is March 4th, 2021. So if you looked at an old one, you actually know what date and how recent or how old it is. My name is Dr. Valda Crowder, also known as Dr. V. I'm an emergency medicine physician. I've been practicing now for 30 years. I've treated people across 4 pandemics, 2 Category 5 hurricanes, and 1 mass shooting. The source documentation for everything on this presentation can be found at www.askdrv.us, and you can follow me on Twitter at AskDR_V. All right, let's get started. A lot has been happening. All right, the structure of this webinar is a slide presentation that's about 20 to 25 minutes, and then we usually try to spend more time on Q&A. And we end right around 9 o'clock. It's not a hard stop. If people have more questions, we'll keep on going, but we get everyone's questions answered. Everyone is actually making real-time, real-life decisions. And so our goal is for this webinar to sort of help facilitate your decision-making with some science. How does everything work? So during this presentation, everyone is in listen mode. You can ask a question either in the Q&A or the chat icon. You can also email me after this, and I will add certain things or begin to research it. If I don't answer your question at the very next presentation, please be aware I am still looking into it. I want to make sure that I really search the literature to actually get the accurate scientific answers to your questions. All right. The intention is to keep webinar participants informed with COVID-19 science that will help you and your family stay healthy during this pandemic. The outcome is that you'll leave the webinar motivated to create or approve an action plan for yourself or your family. You may also be motivated to create or improve an action plan for a broader community. Maybe you represent a church or a business or a synagogue or a homeowners association or a county, or a school, or a union. All right, so far we've had 527,000 people died from COVID-19 within the last year. That is similar to the entire population of either Miami, Atlanta, or Baltimore. It's also the same number, or roughly the same number of people that died in World War I and World War II combined. And we are just coming upon a year. As many of you may remember, we had the shutdown that started last year on May 15th. So we're within a week of a year. When you look at the global stats, there's been 1,115 million cases of COVID-19, 2.5 million people have died, almost 2.6. The United States is 4% of the global population, but we represent 25% of the cases, and we represent 25% of the deaths. So we have uniquely not done well with COVID-19. A lot of nurses are tired and traumatized. Many of them are quitting during the pandemic. This is really, really unfortunate. Some are moving to less stressful environments still within healthcare, and others are just quitting the profession altogether. I think that it is unfortunate. It's very, very important that we wear masks and get vaccinated to really try to decrease the burden on our healthcare system. Now, this is unfortunate, but I want to talk about this. The Texas governor decided to lift the mask mandate and allow businesses to open at 100% capacity. Now, I want to remind people that they can actually wear a mask and they don't need their governor to tell them to do it. So, and just because businesses are open to 100% capacity doesn't mean you need to go. This is a bad idea at the absolute wrong time when we have mutations running around, and I'll discuss that a little bit later. I want to thank Kroger's, Starbucks, and Target, because these retailers have said they are going to still require masks in their stores despite the end of a state mandate. And we appreciate them helping all of us stay healthy. In these stores, no mask, no service. And we want to actually thank them because they are being a hero at a time that we actually really need them to be. I also want to thank Gulf Oil. I went to actually go pump gas the other day, and I saw this sign on the gas station pump. It said, please wear gloves or use a paper towel to pump gas and for all touch points on the gas pump. Again, Gulf Oil, we thank you as well for reminding us that these sorts of touch points are actually very, very important touch points that someone might normally just forget about. Early on in the pandemic, I was getting out of my car and spraying the buttons and also the handle that you pick up when you pump your car, and people were looking at me like I was crazy. So I am really, really glad that Gulf Oil is taking things seriously and putting this on their pumps. Now, this is a study that actually came out today. It shows, and this may be why the United States is doing a lot worse than other states. It shows that you are 113% more likely to end up in the hospital if you are overweight. And the death rates are 10 times higher in countries where adults are overweight. This is also important when we look at reopening schools, because childhood obesity rates in the United States are also amongst the highest. All right, so let's get started here. As many of you know who've been on here, I tell people all the time, respect COVID-19. It is highly, highly contagious. Minimum time of exposure to actually catch it is 45 seconds. And for the mutations, it is 15 seconds. So the minimum time of exposure for COVID-19 is very, very short. The other thing that's important is if 100 people get exposed to COVID-19, 60 to 80% of them will get it. Again, with the mutations, these numbers are even higher. These numbers are above 90%. So respect COVID-19. It is both a droplet and an airborne disease. The droplets are larger. They fall within 3 feet, which is why the original recommendation was for everyone to be 3 feet apart. We later realized that they're also airborne. These are smaller particles that hang in the air a lot longer. So this is kind of what it looks like. If this gentleman here has COVID-19, he may be talking, yelling, coughing, singing, sneezing, whatever, without a mask. And the red is the droplets and the gray is the airborne. Now the gray stays in the air for different periods of time, depending upon the temperature and the humidity. If it is less than 52 degrees, COVID-19 hangs in the air longer and hangs on surfaces longer. And so that's how come you see that it actually is worse in the wintertime. Now, how do you get tested? The PCR test is the gold standard. That is the one that's very uncomfortable. They put a swab pretty far up your nose. It's most accurate 8 days after exposure. It can be inaccurate if it's done too soon or too late. The rapid test is a quick test. You usually get the answer right away. The issue with that is it gives you a false negative about 30% of the time. So what that means is the test tells you that you do not have COVID-19 when you do. I want to repeat that. The rapid test, 30% of the time, will tell you that you do not have COVID-19 when you do. So if the test is positive, it's probably accurate. If it's negative, you probably need another one. All right, I've been telling everybody, upgrade, upgrade, upgrade your mask. The material mask that people had been making at home, those are 20 to 30% effective. The surgical mask, the upper right there, are 25 to 35% effective. The KN95 mask, those are 80 to 90% effective. So you really want to get a KN95 mask, and they're becoming a lot easier to get, and I'll talk about where. I just showed you the Spirion half respirator mask, which is a N100 mask that I use sometimes if I'm seeing actual COVID patients. This is Costco. Costco has 100 masks for $2.59. I've also seen them at Home Depot and Lowe's, smaller containers where you can get maybe 10 or 15 masks at a time. So I would tell people start at Target, Costco, Lowe's, and Costco. Those are the places where you can actually get these fairly easily. Now, some people have a problem. They say, oh, the mask is too uncomfortable. I just want to show people this is what happens when I actually put people on a ventilator. This is not uncomfortable. This is really uncomfortable. And this is a blade that we use to go back into the back of the throat and lift up the back of the tongue and actually put a tube down through the vocal cords and put someone on a ventilator. Okay, let's talk about the 6 clusters of symptoms. Clusters 1, 2, and 3 are flu-like symptoms without a fever, flu-like symptoms with a fever, and gastrointestinal symptoms like vomiting and diarrhea. These 3 clusters, often you can go home and do fine. And remember, there's another 7th cluster, which is completely asymptomatic. It is sometimes preceded by loss of smell or taste or loss of appetite, but it is not always preceded by that. So just because you didn't have loss of smell or taste or appetite doesn't mean that you do not have COVID. You still may have it. Cluster 4 is associated with fatigue. Cluster 5 has confusion. And cluster 6 has a combination of abdominal and respiratory symptoms. And those are the ones that people have to be admitted. They may go to the ICU. They may be put on a ventilator, and some of them may pass. COVID toes is an interesting symptom that a lot of people don't know about. It is what they call that multi-inflammatory system. It is basically, it makes your toes look like either they've been in shoes that are too tight or they've been frostbitten. This is COVID-19 until proven otherwise. I have seen this it's more common in young people, but I've even seen it in adults up to about 55 or 60. Now let's talk about patient outcomes. So we have people who catch COVID and they may be asymptomatic or symptomatic. They completely recover and they never develop symptoms again. That's the best possible scenario. Then you have people who are asymptomatic or symptomatic, they recover, and then the symptoms return later on. These are called long haulers. I'm actually working on getting a long hauler. I'm in conversation with a long hauler to actually interview one. So we can actually, on one of these calls, actually speak with a long hauler. So we kind of get a feeling for what that's like. Then there's people who had COVID. They actually recover, and then they catch it again. And it is a reinfection. You can catch COVID-19 again. You can catch for a second time one of the mutations. It is not guaranteed to be less severe. It could be more severe. It really depends upon what you catch for the second time. So I don't really recommend it. Then you have people who caught COVID-19. They become seriously ill. They're in the ICU. And they have what we call post-ICU syndrome when they come out of the ICU. So post-ICU syndrome is associated with either a cognitive, mental, or physical impairment. It impacts about 75% of the people who come out of the ICU. They may also have renal failure requiring dialysis or transplant. They may have limb amputations associated with the clotting from COVID-19. There also can be strokes. In young patients with strokes, about 50% are not able to return to work. And then you can get lung scarring and decreased lung capacity. Some of it can be to the point where we've had people who had to actually go through a bilateral lung transplant. Researchers have found far higher levels of COVID-19 in the brains of mice than the lungs, which is why we may be seeing some of the long haul symptoms, which are usually neurologic. All right, so let's talk about if you found out you were positive, just quickly, you want to make sure to have a pulse ox. The first number is the most important number. That's the number that says 97. You really want that to be above 94, 95. Everybody should be taking zinc and vitamin D3, whether or not you have COVID-19 or not. It is really a little late to take zinc and vitamin D3 once you've already become COVID positive. You really want to have the zinc and the vitamin D3 already in your system. And I actually have given the recommended dietary allowances. You want to have a bathroom that's only used by you, a cell phone where you can call 911. You're not going to call family members because you don't want to get them sick. People can leave food at your door. Opening windows are very important. And if you live with others, you may want to actually upgrade your HEPA, your filters in your heating and air conditioning system, which is something that can simply be done now, going to a Home Depot or a Lowe's. Treatment plan, COVID patients are treated with oxygen, vitamin D and zinc, as we talked about. Famotidine. Famotidine is Pepcid AC. You can also buy this in the drugstore, and you should have this in your house during this time period. If you actually get sick, it is a good thing to take. It blocks histamine release, so it begins to block some of the inflammation associated with COVID-19. Decadron is given in the hospital. That also blocks inflammation. We'll talk a little bit about antibodies. They're made by the manufacturer there is Regeneron and Eli Lilly. And then we'll also talk about ECMO, which is extracorporeal membrane oxygenation. When someone fails ventilation with a ventilator, that is an option if they're younger, to actually put them on basically a heart and lung machine. All right, so let's talk about the antibodies. The antibodies are, like I said, they're by Eli Lilly or Regeneron. What's important is to find out where is there an infusion center near you before you get sick. I'm often surprised at how many doctors do not know where this is. So if you ask your physician, they may not know. So I would suggest calling the hospitals near you and find out, do they have a COVID-19 antibody infusion center? It may be a couple of months before you can get the vaccine, and you want to know just in case anybody in your family gets sick. What's important is you only have 9 to 10 days to get to the infusion center from the time you become symptomatic. So that is really, really important. If you wait around at home for 14 days, you go to the infusion center, they will not give you the antibodies. Now, 65 and older automatically qualify for antibodies if you're having symptoms. 12 to 64 qualify for antibodies if you have a risk factor. But being slightly overweight, just 20 or 30 pounds overweight, is a risk factor. So diabetes, high blood pressure, kidney disease, immunosuppression therapy, there's a ton of risk factors. I've only named a few in this slide. So you want to make sure that you have all these things and you know where all of these things are. We found that immunity basically lasts for 90 days for sure, and sometimes up to 5 months, according to a UK study. That is why we're seeing people catch COVID-19 for a second time, because their antibodies actually wane over time. All right, so let's talk about the vaccine. This is how COVID-19 actually works. The viral RNA for COVID-19 are the orange dots in a semicircle. It is covered by a fatty layer, which is the orange layer. The orange also includes a spike protein. That spike protein binds to a receptor that is on the surface of your cell. It clicks, it opens up your cell, it gets inside your cell, and the RNA in your body tells the ribosomes to begin copying the viral protein as well as the fatty layer. It reformulates itself, and it goes out of the cell, and then it goes in to infect another cell. So this happens over and over and over again in your body. You have about 1 trillion cells in your body. So as you can imagine, this is happening all over the place. So sometimes people come in with COVID-19 and they say, I feel like my whole body is on fire. That's because this replication is going at a very, very fast speed throughout their entire body. So how do these vaccines work? So you have Moderna and Pfizer. Both of them are 2 doses, and they use a messenger RNA approach. The messenger RNA is coded only for the spike protein on the surface. So when you get the vaccine, you begin to produce the spike protein. Then your body recognizes the spike protein, recognizes it as foreign, develops antibodies, and kills it. So now when your body sees COVID-19 in the community, It actually recognizes the spike protein, it has the antibodies for it, and it kills it, and it never gets into your cell to actually reproduce. Now, Johnson & Johnson is a little bit different. It's called a viral vector approach. Adenovirus, which is the virus for a common cold, it alters that virus to become harmless. It adds a genetic material of COVID-19, and the combination teaches your body to generate antibodies that, again, attack the spike protein. So the virus cannot attach and is rendered harmless when you see it in the community. All right, so let's talk about what we've got here, because we've got basically 3 vaccines that have actually now been approved: Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson. The Pfizer and Moderna are both 95% effective. Now, I remind people, Pfizer and Moderna were tested when there were no variants. Johnson & Johnson came along later when there were variants. So we don't know what the numbers are for Pfizer and Moderna with these variants. So you can't necessarily compare these as apples to apples. The 3 numbers of 72, 66, and 57 is Johnson & Johnson in the US, 672, 66 is South America, and 57 is in South Africa. What's most important is that the Johnson & Johnson can use basic refrigeration, and it's 1 shot. For all of these vaccines, the side effects are pretty similar: headache, chills, fatigue, maybe a fever. The Janssen trial, which is going on now, is 2 shots of the Johnson & Johnson. So that is currently going on because they're trying to see, does a 2nd shot help? The Novavax is also in clinical trials right now. That's actually in clinical trials at Howard University. That is showing around 90% effective. And then the Oxford or AstraZeneca vaccine has not been approved in the US, but the early data is showing about 70% effective. And again, a lot of that was also done in the UK. People ask me all the time, what is in the COVID-19 vaccine? This is what is listed on the FDA website. You are welcome to take a picture of it with your phone if you want to know what is actually in the vaccine. I also get questions about, is there antifreeze or ethylene glycol in the vaccine? The answer to that is no, but there is polyethylene glycol. Polyethylene glycol is found in lotions, creams, and toothpaste. It helps the vaccine evade the immune system and stay in circulation so it can begin working. Now, a lot of people are concerned this vaccine was really developed too quickly. It was developed in 11 months. Well, it was not developed in 11 months. SARS, which happened in 2002, caused about 810 deaths across 33 countries. And in 2003, they started working on vaccine development. This is a 2005 article. I have this on my website. I suggest everyone read it because it talks about viral vector approach, messenger RNA, and this is what we actually need to do for the SARS virus. So how does this relate to COVID-19? SARS and COVID-19 are almost like cousins. They're very, very similar. They both have a spike protein. They both cause severe respiratory symptoms, and 80% of their DNA is the same. So when they had developed a SARS vaccine and COVID came along, they only had to make minor adjustments to actually use, to make an adjustment to actually make the COVID vaccine. Had we actually had a pandemic with something that was not related to what we had already seen, we would have been waiting 4 or 5 years for a vaccine, and it would have been very, very catastrophic, even more catastrophic than what we're currently experiencing. All right, mutations. Mutations are going on. They happen in places where there's a lot of out of control infection. The way to monitor it is through genomic surveillance. We are not doing a very good job of genomic surveillance because we don't really have the funding for it in our health department. So part of the $1.9 trillion is going through Congress right now is actually to have genomic surveillance. So I think that once that gets passed, the money gets out and allocated, we will see more surveillance. These are the ones that are the current mutations. The UK variant does seem to actually, it seems to be, although it's more contagious, it does seem like both the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine actually work against it. I'm not sure about Johnson & Johnson. I just haven't seen the data, so I'm not sure exactly on Johnson & Johnson. The mutation that is most concerning is a South African variant. That one is the one that has a lot of different mutations to it. It is the most common strain now in South Africa and Zambia. It is highly, highly contagious and is also very dangerous to children. And this is one of my concerns around opening up the schools. I think it's very, very important that you take something like this into consideration, and also take into consideration, do you have younger kids who are vulnerable? Are there any risk factors as far as obesity or Down syndrome or anything like that? The Brazilian and California variant are also out. And last week, they actually talked about another variant called the New York City variant. Now, one thing you'll notice is variants only happen in places where the infection has been out of control. So you're not going to see a New Zealand variant or a South Korea variant or a Taiwanese variant, because these places have actually done a very good job of clamping down their infection. So you're only going to see variants in places where there is a lot of infection. New York, California, Brazil, UK, South Africa. This is why it's really, really important that we clamp down on these infections completely and not open up too early. Overall, we've had 107 million doses distributed and 80 million administered in their arms. This is basically what it looked like as of last week. Actually, this was actually updated. I'm sorry, this was actually updated February 16th. So this is what it looked like 2 weeks ago. So we're tracking pretty good. You know, as they get distributed, they are getting administered in people's arms. Now, how do you get your vaccine? Most places have had criteria of being 65 years and older, but I am happy to say tonight that as of next week, that ends. So, and it will end in a lot of places. So you can search your county public health department and search COVID vaccine and look for instructions. There's also some retail places that you can look at. So let's look at this. Merck is actually going to help Johnson & Johnson actually manufacture its coronavirus vaccine. So that is actually expanding the manufacturing capacity, which is great because these are two rivals that are now going to actually work together to help us increase supply. So the Maryland website, here is what it looks like. This is the website, and this is actually what it actually looks like when you actually get there. California is myturn.ca.gov. Here's what their site looks like. These are all the state public health department websites. White House is also sending millions of vaccine doses to retail pharmacies. So let's talk about that. CVS and Walgreens. These are their sites, and this is what it looks like to get on. Now, originally, there to the left, CVS was only doing a couple states. I've heard that they've, not a couple, but maybe 10 or 12. I've heard that they've expanded that significantly. So if you go on their site, they actually have in red what are their available locations. On all of these sites, they will ask about eligibility. Now, Vaccine Hunter and vaccinefinder.org are two sites where you can actually go to see where are there extra doses. So sometimes there are more doses in the bottle than your manufacturer has actually said there's going to be. So there's some extra doses. You also have people sometimes who don't show up for their appointments. You've also had, like, for instance, in Texas, with everything that happened with the weather, you had refrigerators and freezers stop working because of no electricity. So suddenly, mass amounts of vaccines had to be administered to anybody who was close. The website on the left is a private website. The website on the right, which is vaccinefinder.org, is a CDC-approved website that is in association with Boston University. All right. Now, This is the important thing. Rite Aid. Rite Aid, starting Monday at certain locations, is going to have the Johnson & Johnson vaccine for anyone over 21 years of age, regardless of risk factors. So it does not matter. Now, this particular location in Shrewsbury, Pennsylvania, which is not too far from Mechanicsburg, Harrisburg, if you're living in the DC area, or if you're in Rockville, it is probably maybe an hour and 25 minutes away. You can shoot up there. There's their number. I'm not even sure if you need an appointment, but you should call and ask. If you go up there, tell them Dr. V sent you, or if you want to actually call the Rite Aids that are closer to you. But Rite Aid has told me that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is not going to be available at all of their locations. So one of the things that I'm working on now is trying to find out, well, what locations will it be available? But I do know for sure, because I know the pharmacist that's at this location, that it will be at this location starting Monday. Now, should you get vaccinated? Weakened immune system, the CDC says yes, after consultation of your primary care physician. Autoimmune, same thing, yes, after consultation with your primary care physician. Guillain-Barré or Bell's palsy, they say yes. Now, pregnant or lactating has not been studied. The vaccine has not been studied. They said you may consider it after consultation with your OBGYN. I would say what is important is that if you're considering getting pregnant, that you actually get the vaccine before you get pregnant. Pregnant women have an increased risk of getting viral infections. So you don't want to, let's say, get pregnant in April or September or May or June and not have already taken the vaccine. G6PD deficiency, yes, after consultation with your primary care physician. One of the questions I had was, what about fertility? Does the vaccine impact fertility? I have not seen any evidence yet that it impacts your fertility, and we're actually still looking for any study. I will have the definitive answer by Tuesday. Now, when I show this list, people say, well, who should not get the vaccine? Well, I'm going to tell you who should not get the vaccine. If you currently have COVID and you're having symptoms, you should not get the vaccine. The other thing that people should not do is you should not actually get the flu shot or the shingles shot or any other immunization before this immunization. You want to make sure that you haven't taken any shot or immunization within the last 2 weeks. You also want to make sure that anything that might suppress your immune system, like steroids, prednisone, you want to see whether or not your doctor can get you off of them, because it's not actually, you want to have your immune system in its strongest shape before taking the vaccine. Now, let's talk about the vaccine safety programs that the CDC runs. There's VAERS, which is a vaccine adverse effect reporting system. There's VSD, which is a vaccine safety data link. And then there's CISA, which is a clinical immunization safety assessment. Now, the VAERS event reporting system, this basically, anyone can submit a report. You can be a patient, a child, a healthcare professional, a nurse, a respiratory tech. Anyone can report a adverse effect, impact of the vaccine to the vaccine adverse event reporting system. Now, the vaccine safety data link, this actually analyzes healthcare information from 2 healthcare systems. One is 24 million people, and the other one is 190 million people. Lastly, the Clinical Immunization Safety Assessment Project actually works in collaboration with 7 medical research centers and also monitors safety of vaccines. So if you want to actually search the system, the surveillance system, you can actually see the data. So people ask me, well, how many people had this side effect? How many people had that side effect? You go to this website and you can actually search the database. We actually did it last week on this webinar. So I provide this link for everyone here. The 7 sites are Boston University, Columbia, Johns Hopkins, Duke, Vanderbilt, and Kaiser, and University of Cincinnati, where I went to medical school. And these are the sites that are working in collaboration with the CDC on the Clinical Immunization Safety Assessment site. I would also say that Cincinnati's Children's Hospital is also one of the sites that's actually testing whether or not the vaccine is safe for children. And I suspect that we will actually see that data sometime in the late spring. Now, what if you had your vaccine already? As soon as you get your shot, are you actually, when do the antibodies, when does everything start forming? So if you get your shot, and I'm specifically referring to Pfizer and Moderna, I do not have the data yet on Johnson & Johnson, but if you're getting a Pfizer and a Moderna shot, you have no immunity for the first 2 weeks. Immunity begins to build right at day 12 to 14. Then you get your second shot. Now, people are saying normally before your second shot, we are seeing the vaccine almost 75, 80% effective. And then you get the last 90 to 95% effectiveness with the second shot. Now, a lot of people say, if I have that much effectiveness, why do I need to get the second shot? So one of the things that we don't know is it's not only how effective it is, but how long does it last? So the second shot may also help with what we call the durability and making the vaccine last longer. Now, in Israel, which has done a great job in vaccinating its citizens, more than 97% of the COVID deaths are now people who have not been vaccinated. This is a race. This is basically, we're trying to move faster than the virus. As the virus mutates and stays around longer, it makes it more and more difficult to control. This is why it's so important when you have a pandemic to jump on it early, because once it gets out of control, it is much, much harder to put the genie back in the box. So this really is a race. I agree with Dr. Fauci on this. Now, this is very interesting. This is a full-faced super mask. This is actually, this has 4 HEPA 11 filters. It has a washable fabric scarf. It has 8 hours of battery life. The full face actually does not fog up, they're saying. I haven't purchased this, but this is just what they're saying. There's cushion liners to make it sort of comfortable. It's got a little carrying case, and it works well with iPods and live streaming. So this may work well for people who maybe, work in an environment. I could see somebody using this even as like a bartender. I've been seeing a lot of bartenders come into the emergency department with COVID because there's a lot of face-to-face. So just wanted to show the little video. This was sent to us by one of our folks who actually watched this.
Introducing Air by Microclimate. Air's acrylic dome gives a wide range of view, making you feel as if there is nothing in front of you. It also gives others a clear view of your face and your expressions. Air comes with 4 HEPA filters located around the frame. These filter 95% of particles up to 0.3 microns coming in and out of the air, keeping you and those around you safe. At the bottom of the dome are 2 dual-speed fans that pull air through the mask, creating a better overall airflow through the helmet, keeping it fog-free and comfortable. On the top are 2 batteries that power your air. On a full charge, you will get up to 12 hours on the low fan setting and 8 hours on high. On the right side of the helmet, under the small flap of fabric, you will find the on-off switch for the fans, as well as the charging port. The hood and neck scarf are made of an impermeable fabric, forcing all incoming and outgoing air through the filters. At the bottom of the scarf are 2 drawstrings used to cinch the fabric comfortably around the neck, creating a seal. And if you have long hair or a beard, don't worry, this is just as effective for you too. Now that we've introduced you to the features of Air, you can enjoy its many benefits.
All right, so I just wanted to show you that this is not cheap. It is $2.99, so it is not something that would be for everyone. But certainly, if people feel like they are at a particularly high risk, or if they feel like they have a job that puts them at a particularly high risk. This is something that you can use. Obviously, this is about as much as a box of 100 masks. So, all right, and we've got some heroes that have gotten their vaccines. I've got some new photos in there, so I wanted everybody to see. We've got some new faces that have gotten vaccinated. I want to thank you for sending me the photos. Please keep sending me these photos. I will continue to update and add, and we'll roll some people off that have been on here and get the new people on. And so it is really, really good to see you guys on the collage getting vaccinated.